Hey everyone, this is the nervous system. I recently learned a fun fact about the nervous system and I don't want to forget it, so I'm going to tell you. If you were to add up all the neurons that you have in your body, the length of them would be 45 miles. So that is a ton of nerves in the human body. Pretty cool. So let's learn about the nervous system. The nervous system is made up of the brain, spinal cord, and all your nerves. And so there's like three main types of nerve cells that we call neurons. And those are called sensory neurons. So they collect information about the inside and outside of your body. And then interneurons, I'm recording. They're kind of the intermediary middleman between the sensory and the motor. They're usually in your brain or spinal cord. And then motor neurons, they are the ones that control your muscles and your glands and like tell it what to do. So the steps usually go, like it doesn't always, but usually you have sensory neurons collect information. They give it to the brain or spinal cord through the interneurons, like pass the information, and then the brain and spinal cord figures out what to do. And then the motor neurons carry it out. That's usually how the process goes. So let's see here. These are neurons. You've probably seen pictures of these. Let me look at like this end one on the right. This one's like the most classic one. So on the one on the right on C, you can see this head part, and then it goes to a tail. The head is the cell body. The tail is the axon. That is the direction that a nerve impulse goes from head to tail. And then they all connect from head to tail. So if we go back over to the left, you can see the receptor endings. That is the sensory neuron going from head to tail, the cell body's in the middle. And then that's going to convey the information to the interneuron, which is like usually shorter, it's in the brain. And then that's going to convey information to a motor neuron to tell your body what to do. And those are usually really long, like they can be super long. Here are the parts to a neuron. You have the cell body. Like I said, it goes from head to tail. So first thing that happens is another nerve or something else stimulates it. Maybe it's somebody touching the nerve if it's sensory. And then that's going to trigger action potential is what we call it, like a nerve impulse down the nerve going from head to tail. Once it reaches the axon, it's going to then convey that to another nerve or neuron. Neuron is the nerve cell. Nerve is like the whole thing, which you probably know. So neurons are excitable. They produce an electric signal. So it is literally electricity caused from ions moving in and out, which is pretty cool. And then sometimes the neurons are resting when they're not working. And I'll show you what happens with the sodium channels and stuff. Okay, let's see here. So this is a weird picture of the plasma membrane, but you've probably seen a picture of the phospholipids like this, with the polar head and the non-polar tails. So this is showing part of the cell body there. The cell membrane are this plasma membrane, these phospholipids, and you've got outside and inside. So when the nerve is at rest, then these ions are not moving in or out. They're just staying. When the nerve is not at rest, it's going to become more negative on the inside of the nerve, and that's actually what the nerve impulse is. So the outside is going to be positive, the inside is going to be more negative or less positive. And so what's shown here is sodiums are being pumped out and potassiums are being pumped in using an ATP. This is active transport because it's going against the concentration gradient and using ATP. You have these other types of pumps too. And these pumps can be interchangeable depending on what type of, there's different pumps depending on what you need. Like if you're in a cycle of like pain or stress, these little pumps can be changed out to respond to that. Okay, so the nerve impulse is called an action potential. They are self-propagating and they go from head to tail. Some neurons are weird shaped and it's hard to tell what's head or tail, but generally it goes from the cell body to the axon. And like I said, the charge on the inside of the nerve is going to become negative. So the neuron can't fire until it's reached resting potential, which is like a setting, like a reset setting. It has to be at that setting with the charges before it can make a new nerve impulse. And then these pumps, the pumps that I showed you, the sodium and potassium pumps, they get it back to normal. Action potentials are all or nothing. Either they happen or they don't. It's not like a medium. So like either you have the nerve impulse or you don't. Has to reach a threshold. So here's what's happening during the nerve impulse. Oh, I might have this backwards. I think I told you backwards. Yes, I did. Sorry. When the neuron is at rest, it's negative inside. When there's an action potential going through, it's positive. It changes to positive. So I have that completely backwards. So this is inside the cell, and then the blue is outside the cell, and this is when it's at rest. And then when a nerve impulse is acting on it, you're going to have a bunch of sodium ions move in, and it's going to be positive inside. So you can kind of see that it's going to move down the line, like down the axon tail. These channels are going to open and close and let sodium in and potassium out. Actually, you have two different channels, sodium channels and potassium, and they're going to reverse the charge. And that's just rippling that nerve impulse down the length of the neuron. So here's sodium coming in, potassium coming out. So there's different types of channels. This is how fast the nerve impulse happens in milliseconds, which is 1,000th of a second. So a really short amount of time. It has to reach this threshold here, this dotted line. So once the action potential reaches that threshold, then it can go and cause a nerve impulse, an action potential. And then it has to reset. So do you see how it overshoots the resting level? That's what we were talking about, where it has to like get back to that resting potential, and then it can restart and do another nerve impulse. Okay, so when the action potential reaches the end of the nerve, it's going to release what we call neurotransmitters. And you've probably heard of some neurotransmitters. These are chemicals that are released from the end, the axon ending of a nerve. Some examples are acetylcholine. You probably haven't heard of that one. That's a muscle one. Epinephrine and norepinephrine. Have you heard of epinephrine? Probably. So here's what happens. Okay, here, this middle picture here, this is the end of an axon. So imagine like the axon tail, this is the very tippy top end. And once it reaches the end, it has these little chemicals in these little sacs called vesicles. They're going to reach the end, release these chemicals. These are the neurotransmitters. Other ones that you've heard of are dopamine, serotonin, melatonin. Those are all neurotransmitters, yeah? So it's going to release those into this space here, and then they're going to attach to the next, right here, to the next neuron, and then cause that neuron to stimulate. So it's how the way that they pass the message from neuron to neuron is using these neurotransmitters in the synapse, which is the space. Here are some different neurotransmitters and what they do, and you probably have an idea of what some of them do. So we use them for at different times for different things. You also have neuromodulators. They can amplify or dampen an effect. This is also how drugs work. So like endorphins inhibit nerves from releasing substance P, which is, I think is on that list. No, it's not. And then, let's see, synaptic integration. Sometimes you have like different signals saying opposite things. And so they just like take a total of all these signals, and then that's how they figure out what to do. After the neurotransmitters are released in the synapse, you have to get rid of them. They have to be cleaned out of there. Otherwise, they're going to keep stimulating the next nerve. And so all of these things can cause disorders for people. All right, so nerves are long distance. They sometimes are reflexes, and they don't actually go to the brain. So when the doctor's checking your knee-jerk reflex, that information is not actually even going to the brain. It's just going to the spinal cord down in your back. And that's how that signal, it's still going from sensory neuron to interneuron to motor neuron, but it's just not going to the brain. What is that? Okay, so here's the neuron again. A nerve is made of many neurons, And then I haven't mentioned this, but you've probably noticed on the axon tail, they have like these little like clusters of sheets kind of things. That's called the myelin, and that protects it and makes sure that the nerve impulse zips right through. It's kind of like on a wire, like the insulation on a wire. And when somebody has multiple sclerosis, their immune system is attacking the myelin sheets. And that's what causes problems, neurological problems. I think that's the same picture. Okay, here is a reflex. So this is where um, I'm trying to figure out what their little prompt is here. So this person holds the bowl and puts weight on it. And I think this is how your body knows not to drop the bowl, I guess. Um, so your sensory neurons are going to sense that weight. That's going to send information to your spinal cord, to this interneuron. If you see these little symbols, like the little black, like kind of backwards arrow, and then the circle, that's a way to signify the tail and head of a neuron. And then it's going to return back to the muscles and tell your muscles to contract so you don't drop the bowl of fruit. And then we have the same picture. Your nervous system can be broken up into a lot of different parts. Central nervous system is your brain and spinal cord, and then your peripheral nervous system is all your neurons. And sometimes these structures have different names depending on if you're looking at central or peripheral. We can also break down your central nervous system into somatic or autonomic. Autonomic, somatic is your voluntary, autonomic is your involuntary, and you can break that down further into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is when your body's under normal conditions. Sympathetic is when it's like when you're panicking, like you're running away from a bear. So this shows all of them together with your brain and spinal cord, and then all your nerves, and your nerves travel all over your body. And it's kind of cool to know where they are and what they are. And because if you have some pain, you can maybe track what's causing that. So your somatic nerves, soma means body, that's your trunk, head, and limbs. And then autonomic would be more part of your internal organs. Like these would be more involuntary. And then your brain, this is a whole nother topic, and I'm trying to hurry because I'm trying to keep these videos to 15. Your brain has three main regions: your hindbrain, which is the back, midbrain, and forebrain. The back of your brain and your brainstem is the most important in keeping you alive. And then like your forebrain is more your cerebrum that lets you think and kind of be human, but not actually as important for survival. So your survival part is like kind of way deep inside your brain, protected by your cerebrum. You also have three layers of protection called the meninges. You have fluid that fills the space. You have a blood-brain barrier. So like everything that gets into your blood doesn't necessarily get to your brain, which is great. So this is showing some of those structures. So back in here, the brainstem and the cerebellum, those are like the keep you alive parts of your brain, and they're kind of well protected by everything else. So cerebral cortex is all of this wrinkled stuff, the smart part of your brain. That's what makes humans different than other animals. We're more wrinkled. We have more connections between the wrinkles. Enables us to have conscious thought, language, emotions. There's three areas. There's motor, which means motion, which we've learned about. There's sensory, which is sensing. And then association areas kind of help govern those two. Consciousness is controlled by the reticular formation. Sleep is controlled, I think, the reticular formation also. Memory is usually in your cerebrum. You've got long-term and short-term. I'm just going to skip through some of this. You can read through it. So short-term and long-term memory, this is how it works. And then let's look at some disorders. So concussion, paralysis, epilepsy, those are due to injury. Parkinson's is a neurological disease that they don't think they know what causes it. Alzheimer's also neurological disease. Meningitis is inflammation of the meninges. Encephalitis, brain inflammation. Glial cancers, we didn't talk about this, but you have these glial cells in your brain that are like the glue, and you can get cancer there. You can get multiple sclerosis, and that breaks down your myelin. You can get Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is usually like I think it's autoimmune and your body like freaks out because of a viral or bacterial infection. And then headaches are always challenging. So they can be caused from migraines, tension headaches, cluster headaches, different symptoms for those. There's a lot of neural disorders like ADHD, mood disorders, autism, schizophrenia. And then to test the brain, they can do a lot of different tests on you, but I feel like they still are limited in what they know. So you can get EEGs or PET scans, you can get an fMRI, which shows blood flow, and it kind of shows you what your brain is doing. And then there's brain banks where they study your brain if you want to do that. And then, of course, drugs. Most drugs that are mind altering are working on the synapse level of your brain where the neurons are firing. Nicotine and caffeine are both stimulants, alcohol is a depressant. They work differently, right? And so very interesting to look into if you're interested in that. And then homeostasis with the nervous system. So the brain kind of controls your endocrine system, and that controls everything else. So that is some information about nervous system.